They never said it out loud, but I was always the extra chair. The one left out of family photos, skipped over in toasts, handed babysitting duties while others danced. My voice, my choices, even the man I loved, they turned it all into a joke. Until life turned. Until the same siblings who once called him a delivery boy now waited in his office lobby desperate for a seat. But by then I had stopped asking to belong. I'm Madison, and this is how I became the woman they never saw coming. I was 12 when my sister Vanessa got married, and it was the first time I learned that family doesn't always mean inclusion. Sometimes it means being told softly, politely that you're not wanted. And being expected to smile anyway. They didn't say it outright, of course. That would have been cruel. Instead, my mom stood at the kitchen sink one afternoon peeling apples into a silver bowl and said it casually over her shoulder. "It's going to be a small ceremony, Madison. Just adults. You understand, right?" I remember nodding, even though I didn't. I remember my throat tightening, but pretending I was fine. I was always pretending I was fine. Vanessa was 23 then. She was radiant and ambitious and the center of every room she walked into. She just landed a job with a luxury wedding planning firm in Detroit and had met her fiancé Brandon at one of her events. He came from a family that owned several car dealerships, wore Italian leather shoes, and called my father sir in a way that made everyone beam. The house buzzed with wedding talk. Swatches of satin fabric covered the kitchen table. Stephanie and Ryan were both in the bridal party. Connor was an usher. Everyone had a role. Everyone except me. I offered to help Vanessa stuff envelopes or tie the little silk bows on the favors. She gave me a distracted smile and said, "I've got it, Mads. Don't worry." I worried. Not about the wedding, but about where I fit into all of it. I didn't fit. Still, I made a card. I spent the better part of 3 days on it, folding pale purple paper, writing in gold ink, gluing a pressed daisy from the backyard garden into the corner. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I signed it "Love Your Little Sister" and tucked it into an envelope with care. Then I taped it to the top of the gift box I had picked out with Grandma, an electric mixer that had taken me 3 months of allowance and babysitting money to afford. On the day of the wedding, I wore my best dress anyway. It was navy blue with a little lace collar, and I paired it with a pair of white flats I'd only worn to church. I curled my hair and dabbed on the tiniest bit of lip gloss when Mom wasn't looking. We pulled into the venue, some high-end barn out in the countryside with hanging lights and wildflowers tied to every post. As we parked, Mom turned around in her seat and said, "You'll be helping Mr. Denton with the parking, right? He could use another set of eyes." I looked down at my flats, then back up at her, unsure if she was serious. She was. Mr. Denton was our neighbor, a retiree who volunteered for everything. He waved at me from across the gravel lot and handed me a laminated sign that read, "Welcome." So I stood by the path, pointing cars to the right, smiling until my cheeks hurt. A few guests gave me confused looks. One woman asked if I was the flower girl. I said no, not really. When the ceremony started, Mr. Denton patted my shoulder and said I should grab a plate. I hesitated, but hunger won out. I followed the string lights toward the barn, clutching my card and my nervous heart. Inside, it was beautiful. Rustic and elegant. Tables with ivory linens and golden flatware. Centerpieces of peonies and lavender. A string quartet played something soft and expensive sounding. I looked for my name on the place cards. Nothing. I checked again. Still nothing. Eventually, I found an empty chair near the utility closet where the caterers ducked in and out. I sat next to Mr. Denton, who had already taken off his tie and was working on his second roll. "Here," he said, pushing the bread basket toward me. "Take something, kiddo." I forced a smile and took a piece of dry bread. From our corner, we could hear the speeches. Ryan talked about Vanessa being the glue that held the family together. Stephanie cried as she praised her sister's loyalty and strength. Mom dabbed her eyes and Dad raised his glass. Not a single person said my name. I slipped the envelope onto the gift table when no one was watching. It looked so small there between the brand new Keurig and the crystal vase from Tiffany's. I felt small too. On the way home, the car was quiet. My dress itched, my shoes pinched. My stomach hurt in that dull, empty way that only comes from being both hungry and humiliated. As we pulled into the driveway, Mom finally spoke. "Don't make a fuss, Maddie. It was Vanessa's day. Let her have her moment." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask when my moment would be. I wanted to cry. But I didn't. I climbed the stairs, shut my bedroom door, and sat on the carpeted floor with my back against the wall. I pulled the envelope out of my coat pocket. I hadn't left it on the table after all. The pressed daisy was crushed, the gold ink smudged. I stared at it for a long time, then slid it into the back of my journal. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't ask for anything. But something inside me shifted that night. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something quieter. A kind of noticing. I noticed that love in my family came with conditions. I noticed that being present didn't mean being seen, and I noticed more than anything that I was always the extra chair. The one they only pulled out when absolutely necessary. And I knew deep down that I'd never sit at their table the same way again. By the time I turned 14, I had mastered the art of invisibility. It wasn't something I chose, not exactly. It was just easier that way. Easier to melt into the background than to constantly raise my hand only to be met with silence or the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. So I studied. I read obsessively. While Stephanie experimented with contour palettes and Ryan made TikToks of his marketing genius, I buried myself in poetry and political essays. I didn't expect applause. I just needed something that felt like mine. I started winning things. Small things at first. A local essay contest about civic responsibility. Then a state competition for creative writing. My 9th grade history teacher entered my research project on the civil rights movement into a national student symposium. I got a letter back printed on thick parchment-like paper with a gold crest at the top. I was selected to present in D.C. I handed the letter to my mom while she was folding towels in the laundry room. She skimmed it quickly and said that was nice, then asked if I remembered to scoop the litter box. Dad asked if they reimbursed gas money. No one mentioned it at dinner. That weekend, Ryan got a marketing internship at an auto detailing startup. There was a family barbecue. Balloons. A cake. Stephanie printed banners that said, "Congratulations, Ryan," and posted pictures on Instagram with captions like "Future CEO." I didn't say anything. I sat in the shade with my book and my paper plate and listened to them talk about how proud they were of him. I got used to that pattern. My wins were paperwork. Theirs were parties. Still, I kept going. The way I saw it, if I worked hard enough, read deep enough, maybe someday I would become someone they couldn't ignore. Junior year, I applied early to the University of Vermont. It was my dream school, close enough to home to be reachable, but far enough to feel like escape. I didn't think I'd get in. Their honors program was selective. But I wrote an essay that came straight from the place in me that had been hurting since Vanessa's wedding. 2 months later, I opened the email while sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor. "Congratulations," it said. "Full scholarship. Residential honors program. Leadership grant." I stared at the screen for a long time before I let myself believe it was real. Then I ran downstairs, letter in hand, trying to catch my breath from the rush of it all. Mom was unloading groceries. I held it out like a golden ticket. I got in. Full ride. She blinked and said, "Oh, that's good, honey. Grab the yogurt before it melts." Later that evening, Stephanie came by for dinner. She wore a new jumpsuit and talked loudly about the spa she was opening in Ann Arbor with a friend from high school who had just gotten certified in lash extensions. Mom and Dad nodded along, wide-eyed and impressed. I waited until there was a lull in the conversation. "I got a full ride to UVM," I said quietly. Stephanie raised an eyebrow and tilted her head. "Really? That school gives scholarships." "Huh. Must have lowered their standards this year." Then she went right back to describing her logo mock-ups. Something snapped inside me then. Not loud. Not visible. Just a quiet break. Like a hairline fracture you don't notice until the bones start swelling days later. I didn't argue. I didn't ask her what she meant. I just folded my napkin slowly and excused myself to the kitchen to wash the dishes, though I hadn't eaten yet. From the sink, I could hear them laughing in the dining room. The clang of cutlery, the squeak of Stephanie's heels, the kind of joy that felt locked away from me. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I kept replaying her words. Must have lowered their standards. Maybe they had. Maybe they hadn't. But what stung was not the insult. It was the ease with which she said it. The complete lack of hesitation. The assumption that whatever I achieved must somehow be a fluke. In that moment, something inside me shifted again. It wasn't the quiet noticing from before. It was sharper now. A whisper with teeth. They would never hand me a seat at their table. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because they didn't want to see me there. So, I would build my own. I began preparing for college like it was my one-way ticket out of a burning house. I mapped out my class schedule, applied for early orientation, researched campus jobs. I bought my own bedsheets, printed my own checklists, packed my boxes one by one. No one offered to help. 2 days before I left for Burlington, Mom asked if I wanted to come over for a family dinner. Stephanie had closed on the spa lease. Ryan got a paid offer to manage a social media campaign for a local gym. They were celebrating. I told her I had plans. She said okay. No questions. That night I ate Thai takeout alone on my bedroom floor, surrounded by boxes and packing tape, and felt more peace than I'd felt in months. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it was the start of something better. The night before I left, I slipped the pressed daisy card from Vanessa's wedding out of the back of my journal. The edges were curling. The ink had faded. I thought about throwing it away. About shedding it like a snake skin. But I didn't. I tucked it between the pages of a new notebook instead. Not as a wound, but as a reminder. College was a breath of air I didn't know I had been holding out for. At the University of Vermont, no one knew me as the quiet sister or the invisible one. I was just Madison Brooks, majoring in sociology with a double minor in psychology and gender studies. I joined clubs. I led study groups. I got straight A's and a work-study job in the admissions office. I even started writing poetry again, submitting pieces under a pen name to the campus literary magazine. Back home, life went on like a well-oiled machine without me. Family group texts pinged occasionally, mostly photos of Ryan's new car or Stephanie's spa renovation or Vanessa's baby shower. I responded politely when I did it all. I had learned to be civil without being involved. Then came the weddings. Connor went first. Our youngest brother. He got engaged to a girl he met at a sales training conference. I found out through a Facebook post with a sparkly ring emoji captioned, "She said yes." No one called. No one asked if I could come. Months later, an invite showed up in my inbox addressed to Madison Brooks +1. It felt like a formality more than an invitation. Still, I went. I told myself it was out of obligation, that I was stronger now, and it wouldn't affect me the way it used to. Ethan couldn't come with me that weekend, so I flew alone from Burlington to Grand Rapids, rented a car, and drove 2 hours into Michigan farm country where the wedding was being held. The ceremony was outdoors under a white tent. There was lavender and mason jars and hay bales wrapped in linen as seats. The photos were carefully staged, everyone smiling wide. Except me. I wasn't asked to be in any of the family portraits. When I tried to step into a group shot, Stephanie looked at me and said with a flat smile, "I think this one's just for immediate family." I stepped back. No one noticed. During the reception, I was seated at a table with 3 distant cousins I barely remembered and a couple who kept sneaking outside to vape. I sipped my iced tea and picked at the dry chicken. At one point, a toddler from Vanessa's family started screaming, so I instinctively got up to help. His mom looked exhausted, trying to balance a plate of food and rock the baby on her hip. I crouched beside the little boy and started making silly faces. It worked. He giggled, then reached for the buttercream frosted cupcake on my plate and knocked it directly into the layered wedding cake display. It wasn't a disaster. Not really. Just a smear on the side of the bottom tier. But Vanessa saw it happen. She marched over, high heels clicking like gunfire on the floor, eyes narrowed. "Of course it was you." I stood up slowly, wiping frosting from my hands with a napkin. "It was an accident," I said calmly. Vanessa glanced at the baby, then back at me. You're like a walking disaster, Maddie. A two-legged mess. Connor walked by just in time to hear her and laughed. Good thing you're not the one getting married. The words didn't hurt the way they might have years ago. Maybe because I'd expected them. Maybe because I'd heard worse in silence. I didn't respond. I just excused myself, found my rental car, and left. I didn't cry on the drive back to the hotel. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't even turn on music. I just drove through the dark Michigan backroads, feeling strangely steady. The next morning, I checked out early and skipped the post-wedding brunch. On the flight home, I read through one of my sociology textbooks, underlining sections on group dynamics and family roles. I wrote in the margin with a dull pencil, scapegoat, the member of a group consistently blamed or marginalized to maintain cohesion, among others. That night, I journaled for the first time in months. I didn't write poetry. I wrote facts. Stephanie's wedding, I'd been tasked with picking up Vanessa's dress from the tailor because she was busy. No thank you. Ryan's wedding, I'd been assigned to hand out programs while Vanessa gave a speech. No photos with the bride and groom. Connor's wedding cake incident. Called a mess. Left without dessert. 3 weddings. 3 reminders. Not forgotten. Just ignored. And every time I had told myself I could rise above it. That I didn't need their validation. But, quietly, I had hoped. Just once I wanted to be asked. To be seen not as the problem solver or the stand-in babysitter, but as someone who belonged. It was after Connor's wedding that I stopped trying. The next family text came through a week later. A group photo of everyone at brunch smiling in front of a pancake bar. My name wasn't tagged. I clicked out of the app and opened a blank document on my laptop. I titled it Boundaries. Then I started typing a list. No more obligatory visits, no more last-minute favors, no more hoping they'll change, and definitely no more weddings. Spring came late that year in Burlington. The snow lingered into April, dirty at the edges like it had overstayed its welcome. I had just started my internship as a student counselor at Jefferson, juggling it with my final semester and 2 part-time jobs. Most nights I collapsed into bed with my shoes still on. But, even in the exhaustion, I felt something new. I felt useful. Wanted. Like I was building something on my own terms. One Saturday afternoon, I walked to the town square for a public reading hosted by the local library. It wasn't fancy. Just folding chairs under a white canopy and a sign that said, Open Book Saturdays. I didn't plan to stay long. I just needed a break from fluorescent lights and teenage breakdowns. The first 2 readers were exactly what I expected. A retired history teacher reading her travel memoirs and a local poet who loved sonnets about coffee and rain. Then came a guy who looked completely out of place. He wore a faded hoodie, jeans that had definitely seen better days, and scuffed sneakers. His hair was messy, like he forgot it was an outdoor event. He stepped up to the mic, cleared his throat, and read a passage from Baldwin. It wasn't polished, but it was steady. The words landed softly, then cut sharp. After he finished, I clapped without thinking. No one else did. I guess it wasn't what they were used to. He stepped down and sat in the empty seat next to me. I tried not to glance, but he leaned over slightly. Thanks for clapping. That was kind of brutal. I smiled. You had something to say. People don't always know what to do with that. He looked at me like he was trying to read between my words. Then he stuck out his hand. Ethan Brooks. Madison. We didn't talk for long, just a few minutes. But it was easy. He asked real questions and waited for answers. He didn't fill the silences with stories about himself. When the event ended, he asked if I wanted to grab a coffee at the corner shop. I almost said no. I was used to keeping my distance. But something about his voice made me stay. At the cafe, we sat by the window and talked about everything but family. Books mostly, music. The worst professors on campus. He was in his 2nd year of law school at Vermont Law and working part-time at a legal clinic for low-income tenants. So you're trying to save the world, I teased. No, he said. Just trying not to be part of the problem. There was no arrogance in the way he said it. Just a quiet kind of resolve. We started seeing each other after that. Not officially, not all at once. but in a way that made sense. Study dates at the campus library. Burrito bowls in the quad. Long walks that stretched past midnight where we talked about everything and nothing. It took weeks before I told him anything real about my family. We were sitting on the green behind the admissions building eating ice cream from a food truck that parked there every Friday. He asked about my siblings. I hesitated. They're close with each other, I said. I'm sort of. Not in the loop. He looked over his cone and nodded, waiting. I told him about the weddings. The card I never gave. The group photo I was asked to step out of. The comment about lowered standards. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me families were complicated or that maybe I was being too sensitive. He just said, "You're not wrong, you know. You're just different." And different scares people like that. I blinked hard to keep my eyes from stinging. How do you know that? Because I've been the different one too. My dad was a truck driver. My mom cleaned houses. When I got into law school, my cousin said I was trying to act white. When I started dressing nicer, my uncles called me slick. And when I talked about tenant rights, my own brother said I was making people lazy. He shrugged like it didn't matter anymore. But I saw the hurt tucked behind his voice. So yeah, I get it. People don't always want to see you grow past the box they put you in. We sat in silence for a while after that. The kind that doesn't feel empty. Ethan didn't ask me to explain. He didn't try to fix it. He just let me be there. Exactly as I was. And for the first time I felt seen in a way that didn't require me to shrink or apologize. That night, I walked back to my apartment and pulled out the journal where I had written my list of boundaries. I added one more. Only keep the people who see me clearly. Then I wrote his name. The first time Ethan brought me home for dinner, I almost cried before we even sat down. His mother Lorraine greeted me with open arms and a kitchen that smelled like warm cornbread and rosemary chicken. She wore a faded apron that read, "This kitchen is seasoned with love," and hummed to herself as she stirred gravy on the stove. The apartment was small but spotless, lined with family photos and shelves of cookbooks with notes scribbled in the margins. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, taking my coat. "Ethan's told me all about you. I hope you like peach cobbler." I stood there for a second, unsure how to respond. No one had called me sweetheart in years. She didn't ask about my GPA or what I planned to do after graduation. She didn't comment on my outfit or compare me to someone else. She just asked if I liked dark meat or white meat and whether I wanted sweet tea or water. We ate at the tiny dining table, elbows nearly touching. She asked about my job at the high school, then told us about a teenage girl who'd tried to shoplift nail polish from her store and ended up crying in aisle 6. Ethan teased her gently, and she laughed, a deep, joyful sound that filled the room. "You'd like her mom," he said, glancing at me. "She reads people better than I do." His mom smiled and patted my hand. "Well, then maybe you'll be the one to finally teach my boy how to read between the lines. He still thinks silence means everything's fine." After dinner, we washed dishes together. I offered to help dry, but Lorraine waved me off and told me to sit. "That boy of mine," she said, lowering her voice so he couldn't hear from the other room, "he's stubborn. But he listens when it counts. And he don't like people who lie." She looked me square in the eye, not accusing, just matter of fact. "So if you're serious, be real. That's all I ask." I nodded, the lump in my throat too big for words. On the way home, Ethan reached across the console and squeezed my hand. "You okay?" "Yeah, just not used to that." What, being welcomed like that? He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. A few weeks later, he met my family. I had warned him in vague terms. I didn't want to scare him off, but I didn't want to pretend either. He said he could handle it. I believed him. We drove down to my parents' house for a Saturday lunch. Stephanie was already there, perched on the couch in a jumpsuit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Vanessa arrived 30 minutes late with her husband and their toddler in tow. Ryan popped in with his latest girlfriend, a lifestyle coach who sold collagen powder online. Ethan wore a navy blazer and clean jeans. His hair was neatly combed. He brought a bottle of wine and a bouquet of supermarket tulips for my mom. I introduced him, and he smiled warm and calm. "Good to meet you all," he said, extending his hand to my father. There were nods. Quick, tight-lipped greetings. My mom barely glanced at the flowers before dropping them into a vase without trimming the stems. We sat around the dining table for chicken salad and store-bought rolls. Conversation was surface level until Stephanie leaned over and whispered something to Vanessa loud enough that I heard. "Lawyer, he looks more like your Amazon delivery guy." Vanessa laughed into her glass. Ryan smirked. I saw Ethan's jaw tighten for a split second before he let it go. He kept smiling, kept answering questions. When my dad asked what kind of law he planned to practice, Ethan said tenant advocacy, maybe prosecution one day. My father raised an eyebrow. "So, not corporate?" Ethan shook his head. "Not my thing." There was a long pause. Then Ryan changed the subject to real estate. After lunch, Ethan and I stepped outside while my mom boxed up leftovers. "You okay?" I asked. He shrugged. "I've heard worse." I wanted to apologize, to defend him, to say something sharp enough to sting them back, but he just took a deep breath and said, "They don't define me. And they don't define you either." That night, after we got back to Burlington, he opened his laptop and started typing. I sat beside him silent until he finally said it out loud. "I'm applying for the state prosecutor's track." I looked at him. "Really? Yeah. It's time. I want to stand for something that matters, and I want them to know that the guy they laughed at is the one they're gonna need someday." I didn't say anything. I just leaned in and kissed his shoulder. Not because I needed to reassure him, but because I knew he meant every word. We got engaged on a quiet afternoon in early May. There was no fanfare. No staged photos or flash mobs. Just the two of us in Ethan's kitchen boiling pasta, laughing about nothing in particular. Then he pulled out a small velvet box from the drawer that usually held mismatched utensils and coupons. It took me a second to realize he was serious. His hands were shaking. Mine were too when I said yes. The ring was simple. A gold band with a small diamond, delicate and clear. It wasn't what I imagined when I was a girl flipping through bridal magazines that weren't meant for me. But it was perfect. Because it was his. That night we stayed up making a list of people to tell. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch, bottle of cheap wine between us. Lorraine was first, of course. She cried before he finished the sentence, then immediately offered to cook the rehearsal dinner. Then came my list. Or rather, the blank space where my list should have been. I stared at the page while Ethan read out names from his side: his law school mentor, his former roommate, the woman who owned the diner where he used to bus tables. Eventually, I said, "I think I should write to them. Just to let them know." Them was understood. Ethan didn't speak right away. He looked at me carefully, not with judgment, but with that thoughtful pause he always gave before saying something real. "Write it," he said. "But before you send anything, ask yourself if it's for them or for you. Are you inviting them because you want them there, or because you're afraid of what they'll say if they're not?" I didn't know the answer. So I wrote anyway. I took out a stack of cream-colored stationery I had kept in the back of a drawer left over from when I thought I'd sent handwritten thank you cards for everything. Dear Mom. Dear Stephanie. Dear Vanessa. Dear Ryan. Each letter was its own storm. I tried to be honest. Not bitter, not pitiful. I told them I was engaged, that we were planning something simple, something joyful. I didn't mention how I had been left out of each of their weddings. I didn't mention the group photos I was excluded from, or the comments that still echoed. I tried to write like someone who had already forgiven them. I sealed each one, then I sat with them. For a long time. And one by one I tore them in half. Not out of anger, not even out of grief. But because I realized they weren't mine to send. The people I had written them to weren't the people I had hoped they were. Ethan came home and found me sitting on the floor in a sea of torn paper. He knelt beside me, took one of the halves in his hand, and didn't ask questions. "That bad?" I smiled faintly. "Number. Just not mine to carry anymore." Instead of letters, we sent invitations. 37 in total. Pale green envelopes, recycled cardstock, gold wax seals. No gift registry. No unnecessary words. Just please come as you are and bring only your full heart. We sent them to people who had stood with us in real ways. My college roommate who stayed up with me through every bad dream. Ethan's high school history teacher who used to sneak him granola bars during exam season. Lorraine's friend who taught me how to use a sewing machine and cried when I got my first job. I printed each envelope with care. But I left my family's names off the list. 3 days later, Ethan came home, kicked off his shoes, and casually asked, "What if they show up anyway?" I looked at him. "My family." He nodded. "I mean, they haven't reached out, but if they found out the date." He didn't finish the sentence. "Then I choose which doors stay closed," I said simply. That answer seemed to sit well with both of us. The next week passed quickly. We finalized the guest list, paid deposits, picked out flowers. I found a tea-length white dress online that had lace sleeves and deep pockets. I didn't go dress shopping. I didn't send selfies to anyone. It was just me and a mirror and a quiet sense of knowing. Ethan tailored his suit himself. Lorraine made jokes about it being her only baby's only wedding and stocked her freezer with enough gumbo to feed a small army. I kept checking my phone. Not because I expected anything, but because. No messages. Just silence. Until 3 weeks later, an envelope showed up in our mailbox. White. Neat handwriting on the front. My mother's. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single card. Embossed. No name, no greeting. Just one line. "We heard about the wedding. We hope you reconsider," that was all. No signature, no RSVP, no apology. I read it twice. Then again. Then I walked to the kitchen, dropped it into the recycling bin, and poured myself a glass of water. Ethan watched me, said nothing. I looked up and said softly. They finally said something, but I realized it didn't matter anymore. Because I already knew what silence meant, and this time I was choosing mine too. It started with a knock on the door I wasn't expecting. It was early evening, still light out, and I had just finished folding our wedding favors into tiny paper boxes when I heard it. Ethan was still at the courthouse finishing up a pro bono tenant case. I thought it might be a neighbor, maybe someone from the building needing help with groceries again. But when I opened the door, it was Vanessa. She looked smaller. Not physically, but something about her posture, the way her arms were crossed, how she kept adjusting the strap of her purse. Her hair was perfectly curled, her nails still French-tipped, but her eyes gave her away. They darted past me into the apartment like she wasn't sure what she was walking into. "Madison," she said. "Vanessa." I didn't move to let her in. She shifted on her heels. "I know I'm not exactly welcome, but this isn't about that. It's about something urgent." I raised an eyebrow. She took a breath, her tone suddenly more businesslike. "I'm dealing with a legal issue. One of the venues I partnered with claims I breached contract on a cancellation. They're threatening to pull my event license if I don't settle." I said nothing. She fidgeted with the zipper on her bag. "My lawyer recommended someone who's recently built a strong record with event-related litigation. His name came up 3 times. Ethan Brooks." She didn't look at me when she said it. I'm not sure if she didn't remember his name or if she just didn't think it could possibly be the same Ethan. I blinked once slow. My fiancée Vanessa's face stilled. "Your fiancé is Ethan Brooks." I nodded. She let out a breath that was somewhere between a scoff and a sigh. "I didn't know, I mean. We haven't spoken." "Number. We haven't. Look, I didn't come here to stir things up, I just thought, maybe he'd consider taking the case. I can pay." "Well." I almost laughed. Not at the offer. At the sudden shift in tone. I'd spent so much of my life feeling like a ghost in that family. And now the ghost had something they wanted. "I'm sure you can," I said. "But my fiancé is busy planning a wedding right now." "Our wedding?" Her lips pressed together. She didn't like that I emphasized it. But I didn't care. "Maybe later," she asked, the desperation finally creeping through her voice. "You'll have to ask him," I said flatly. "But if I were you, I wouldn't count on it." She left without saying goodbye. That night, Ethan walked in carrying 2 containers of takeout and a tired smile. "You'll never guess who stopped by," I said as I took the food. "Vanessa." He blinked. "How did you?" She was waiting outside the courthouse. Caught me on the steps. Said she was in trouble. Something about a venue dispute. Yep, she came here too. He set the food down and loosened his tie. She asked if I'd represent her. Said I was highly recommended. Never mentioned you. I laughed. Classic. What did you say? I asked. He raised an eyebrow. I told her I couldn't. Conflict of interest. You did. He stepped closer. Madison. She's suing a venue for something she did. And she's trying to use me to save her name. That's not law, that's PR. I nodded slowly. You didn't have to turn her down just for me. I didn't turn her down for you. I turned her down for me. And for every client I already have waiting on real help. He paused, then added, but also a little for you. Because I know what she's done. And I know you're not someone she gets to keep using as a backdrop. There was a long silence between us. Not awkward, just full, heavy in a good way. She's going to be mad, I said finally. Let her be. And if she shows up again, he smiled. Then maybe she'll finally learn what it feels like to be left on the outside looking in. I didn't respond. Just reached for his hand and squeezed it. The next morning an email came through my old account. The one I rarely checked anymore, still tied to my maiden name. Subject line urgent, please respond. It was from Vanessa. She asked if I could convince Ethan to reconsider. She said the case was overblown and that the venue owner was just trying to make an example of her. She claimed it was all politics. That this would ruin her brand, her business, her reputation. There was no apology. No acknowledgement. Just request after request. I didn't reply. But I did sit there staring at the screen thinking about all the times I had watched her dismiss me with a laugh or a smirk. All the times I had sat at her weddings, her parties, her baby shower without a seat that belonged to me. And now she was asking for something she couldn't have. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it was finally my turn to choose what peace looked like. And peace this time looked like silence. Under a pale October sky, the calls started coming in again. This time it was Stephanie. The voicemail came in just after lunch while I was setting up bulletin boards in my office at the high school. Her voice was breathy, rushed, trying for composed. Hey Madison. So, I know it's been a while. I heard from Vanessa that you're getting married. Congrats. Really? Anyway, I was hoping to ask for a favor. I didn't play the rest. I didn't need to. Her name alone showing up on my phone was enough to pull me back into the old ache. I put the phone face down and kept arranging college flyers on the wall. That evening, Ethan walked through the door with 2 bags of groceries and a tight look on his face. Ryan came by my office today, he said as he set down the eggs. My brother Ryan. He nodded. What did he want? Apparently he's being sued over a marketing contract. Some big client claims he misrepresented data. They want compensation and damages. I blinked. And what does that have to do with you? He smiled tightly. He asked if I'd represent him. I exhaled. And I said I'd think about it. Then he said something that made me not want to think about it at all. Ethan mimicked Ryan's voice just slightly. I always thought you were just some broke law student mooching off my sister. But I guess you've built a name for yourself. Huh. I stared at him. He said that. Ethan shrugged. I've heard worse. But it was more the tone. Like he thought he was being generous by admitting I wasn't worthless. My hands tightened around the mug of tea I was holding. What did you say? I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. Then I left. He didn't follow. Nope. Stayed sitting there with his branded coffee and his suit 3 sizes too loud. I let out a small breath, unsure whether it was relief or fury. Maybe both. The next morning, I checked my inbox. Stephanie had followed up with an email. Hi Madison, hope you're well. Just wanted to say how proud I am of you. Heard you're marrying someone amazing. Actually, I think I met him once, maybe not. Anyway, I'm in a bit of a situation. She went on to describe an issue at her spa. Apparently some imported products she had ordered from a third-party supplier were being investigated for containing banned substances. A former client had an allergic reaction and was threatening legal action. The board was reviewing her license. She ended the message with, If Ethan has any time for a quick consultation, I'd really appreciate it. No apology, no real warmth, just polished desperation. I didn't reply. That afternoon, Ethan texted me. Stephanie called my office. Said it was urgent. I told her I had a waiting list and a wedding to plan. I smiled at the message for a long time. He didn't ask me what to do, he already knew. 2 days later, someone knocked on our door. I didn't open it. I looked through the peephole and saw Ryan standing there in his crisp suit tapping his phone like it was going to give him courage. I stepped back. Do you want me to talk to him? Ethan asked from the kitchen. Number, I just don't want to let him in. He nodded. The knocking stopped after a few minutes. Then a second voicemail came in. Madison. I know things haven't always been great, but this isn't about the past. I just need a lawyer. I thought maybe we could be adults about it. I didn't listen to the rest. I forwarded the voicemail to a folder titled Unopened. Then I shut my laptop and took Ethan's hand as we walked out for our evening stroll. The trees had started turning along the path by the river. Gold and rust, and that soft kind of orange that makes your heart feel full for no reason. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Back home, Ethan stopped me before I headed upstairs. You know, I don't mind helping people. Even your family. If it's for the right reasons. I know, I said. But this isn't about help, this is about access. And they think you're a shortcut. He looked down. Would it make you feel better if I told them no again? You don't need to say anything. Just don't open the door. He smiled and kissed my forehead. Consider it closed. Later that night, while Ethan dozed off on the couch, I sat alone with a cup of peppermint tea thinking about everything that used to keep me awake. All the birthdays where my name got left off the group text. All the holidays where I sat at the corner of the table while someone else carved the turkey. All the times I smiled too wide just to be seen. And now they were asking. Not because I had changed, but because the world had started to see me the way Ethan always had, and for once I didn't need to prove I belonged. I just had to keep my hand off the doorknob. The morning of our wedding began with light rain. It had been forecasted all week, a steady drizzle over Montpelier, but by noon the skies had cleared and the garden behind the community library looked as though it had been rinsed clean. The chairs had been dried with towels the White Runner reset. Everything smelled like earth and lilacs. Lorraine arrived early with a cooler full of lemonade and a nervous smile that made me laugh. She kept patting my shoulders like she was testing a pie crust for readiness. You sure about this, sweetheart? More than I've been sure about anything I said. The old garden wasn't grand. It had a weathered wooden trellis, a small stone path, and clusters of perennials that had been planted over many years by volunteers and retired librarians. But it meant something to us. It was where Ethan and I met. Where he first asked about my name. Where we had stood reading aloud from books during that spring event 3 years ago. And now it was where we were going to say our vows. Mrs. Goldberg arrived just after 2. She had offered to officiate as soon as she heard we were getting married. She wore a lavender dress and a pin that said "Read Banned Books" and carried a folder of notes written in her perfect cursive. She gave me a hug that nearly knocked the wind out of me. You look radiant, Madison. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? Jenna helped me into my dress in the reading room, which had been cleared of furniture for the day. She adjusted the lace at my shoulders and stepped back with tears in her eyes. They're not here. And that's okay, she whispered. I know, I said. I actually know now. We walked out just before 3. The garden had filled quietly. Not with hundreds, not even with 100, but with people who mattered. Former students, neighbors, colleagues, Lorraine's church friends. Ethan's law school mentor and his wife. People who had chosen to stay. Who had called, who had shown up when it counted. The music began. A violinist playing a slow, familiar tune I couldn't place but felt deep in my ribs. Ethan was already standing at the front in a navy suit that caught the light just enough. He didn't smile right away when he saw me. He just breathed deep and steady like he couldn't believe it either. When I reached him, he took both my hands in his. Mrs. Goldberg began. We are here today not just to witness a marriage but to witness a choice. A promise made by two people who have seen the world, who have walked through fire, who now stand together not in perfection but in clarity. There were no readings from Corinthians, no roses handed to parents, no symbolic sand or candles. Just the two of us, a small crowd, and a truth we had grown into together. I wrote my own vows. I used to think love was about fitting in, about finding someone who made the noise stop. But with you, Ethan, it wasn't about silence. It was about being heard. You never asked me to shrink. You just held the space until I filled it. He smiled and blinked back tears, then read his. Madison, you are the story I never knew I needed. You taught me what it means to show up, to stay, to stand firm without shouting. I vow to never unhear you. Mrs. Goldberg nodded and gestured to the rings. Lorraine passed them to her in a velvet pouch shaped like a library card. As we slid them on each other's fingers, a breeze passed through the garden, soft and golden. You may kiss your bride, she said with a grin. And when Ethan leaned in and kissed me, the crowd burst into quiet, heartfelt applause. Afterward, we shared lemonade and finger sandwiches under a canopy strung with old book pages. People took Polaroids and slipped them into our guest book with notes like, "Never settle for less than magic," and "Don't forget to water your roots." I gave a small toast. Thank you for choosing to be here. Thank you for showing up. And thank you to myself for not giving up before I learned what belonging really feels like. Then I added, without planning to. And to anyone watching from afar wondering why they weren't invited, let me just say this. If you ever made me feel like less, you're not part of the more I've built. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't for applause. It was for release. That night, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Ethan and I sat on the steps of the library watching the last guests drift away. No one asked why my family wasn't there. No one made space for absence, only presence, only joy, only us. Ethan leaned into my shoulder. Do you regret anything, he asked. I thought about that for a moment. Not really. Maybe that I waited so long to believe I was allowed to choose joy. He nodded. Then let's keep choosing it, every day. I wrapped my arm through his, and every door we open from here on out we open together. He smiled and kissed the side of my head. The garden was empty now. The lights above us flickered gently in the breeze. For once I didn't feel like I had to say more than that. We had said everything we needed. Out loud. In front of the people who chose to listen. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking to belong. I already did. The first call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just returned from the library, still in my flat shoes and cardigan, when I noticed the missed call. No voicemail. Just the name Mom. I stared at it like it might disappear if I blinked. For a moment I almost convinced myself it was a mistake. Maybe she meant to call Vanessa or Ryan. Maybe her thumb slipped. But then a text followed. Can you ask Ethan to help your sister? She's desperate. I didn't reply. Instead, I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter, fixed myself a cup of tea, and sat on the porch. The sky was dimming into that soft Vermont blue that always made everything feel gentler than it really was. That night after dinner, I showed Ethan the message. He read it once and handed the phone back. His eyes searched mine. Do you want me to number? You sure? She didn't ask me. She asked through me. He nodded. It's your call. Whatever you want, I'm with you. 2 days later, another text. Longer. She's still your sister. Blood doesn't disappear. Don't be cruel. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed, deleted, then typed again. This time I didn't second guess. And blood has made me bleed enough already. I hit send and muted her number. 3 weeks passed. No more calls, no texts. I saw her name again only when Jenna texted me a screenshot from the local news blog. Bliss Events faces legal action over alleged contract fraud. Vanessa's company. Her name in the headline alongside phrases like irregular documentation, revoked permits, and pending investigation. I wasn't surprised. Ethan read it in silence, then closed his laptop. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't need to. The next week, Stephanie's name appeared in an article about unlicensed skincare procedures at her spa. Ryan, I heard from an old high school friend, had a client threaten a lawsuit over a breached marketing deal. One by one, the ones who had laughed, scoffed, and excluded began to stumble. Ethan came home from court one day and dropped his briefcase gently by the door. Guess who called the office today? Let me guess. Ryan. Bingo. He wanted a consult. Said he heard from a colleague that I might be decent. I raised an eyebrow. What did you say, that I don't do freelance consults, and that my wife and I are taking time to enjoy our first month of marriage? We shared a look. There was no gloating in it. No thrill. Just quiet, steady clarity. A few days later, a letter came in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was a single sheet. Vanessa's handwriting slightly uneven, like it had been written in haste. Madison, I don't expect you to read this, but I need help. I made mistakes. I know that. Ethan is the only one people trust now. I've seen what he's done. I thought he was beneath us. I was wrong. I don't know if he'll talk to my lawyer, but maybe. If you ask him, I'm sorry. For everything. Vanessa, I folded the letter once, then again. Tucked it into the back of my drawer next to old bookmarks and college essays. Ethan saw the envelope but didn't ask. Later that night over tea, he reached for my hand. You okay? Yes. You don't need to answer her, you know. I know. But I also know you might want to. For you. I looked at the steam rising from my mug. I don't. It's not silence out of anger. Then what is it, peace? That weekend I went back to the library garden. The autumn chill had started to settle in, but the trees still held on to their color. I sat on the same bench where Ethan and I had posed for photos just weeks ago. I watched a young girl chase a leaf as it tumbled through the grass. Her mother stood nearby watching with soft eyes and warm hands ready to catch her if she tripped. No one ever caught me when I tripped. But I caught myself. And that counted more. The next day, another call came. I didn't answer. Another voicemail. This time, Lorraine's voice cracked. Please, Maddie. We didn't know how much you were carrying. We didn't mean to. We need your help. I deleted it. That evening, I texted Jenna. You were right. Sometimes silence is stronger than shouting. She replied a minute later. And silence lasts longer too. I stood by the window watching snow begin to drift between the trees. The first snowfall of the year. No fanfare, no warning. Just a quiet change covering everything that once looked sharp and cold. Some people arrive too late. Some apologies do too. But not all stories need a final chapter with everyone in it. Mine was already whole. The hallways were quieter than usual that afternoon. It was nearing mid-May and most of the seniors were already spiraling into graduation mode. I stayed late to finish grading final essays. One of them caught me off guard. Leela, a sophomore who rarely spoke above a whisper, had written about the neighbor who raised her while her mother worked double shifts and her father simply wasn't around. Her words were raw but clear. She talked about bandaging, scraped knees, and being taught how to fold bedsheets into perfect rectangles. The last line stayed with me like a splinter under my skin. Family is not who's in the photos. It's who shows up after they're taken. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the paper. When Jenna stopped by to return my umbrella, she noticed immediately. That one got to you, huh? I nodded. Do you miss them? She asked gently. I swallowed hard. Sometimes. But mostly I just miss what I thought they were. We sat in silence for a while. Jenna didn't push. She never did. That weekend, Ethan and I went to the farmer's market. We stopped at a stand selling handmade mugs. I picked one with a slightly uneven handle and a glaze like storm clouds. It reminded me of something my mother used to say when we were kids. Not everything ugly is broken and not everything shiny is strong. I never knew if she meant it about people. Or herself. We ran into a woman named Cheryl who used to live across the street from my parents. She hadn't changed much, same high ponytail, same oversized sunglasses perched on her head. Madison. Oh my goodness, look at you. I heard the big reunion is happening next month. You coming? I blinked. What reunion? Cheryl looked surprised. Your mom didn't tell you. She rented that big lodge up in Manchester. Everyone's invited. Even Stephanie's flying in from Arizona. It's supposed to be a whole weekend thing, games, dinners, the works. I felt Ethan's hand gently tap the small of my back. A silent question. Are you okay? I smiled at. Cheryl thanked her for the update and walked away. In the car, I let the silence breathe between us before speaking. So, they're having a family reunion. And not inviting you. Apparently, how do you feel? Oddly not surprised. Hurt maybe. But in that dull, distant way. Like touching an old bruise. We pulled into our driveway. I sat in the parked car for a moment longer. They didn't forget me, Ethan. They just decided I wasn't convenient. Back in the house, I curled up on the couch with my journal. I didn't write anything for a while. I just let myself sit in it, all of it. The ache. The clarity. They weren't punishing me by not inviting me. They were preserving the story they told themselves. One where I didn't belong because I dared to change the narrative. That night, Jenna texted. Movie night tomorrow, no drama, just wine and blankets. Yes, please, I replied. At her place the next evening, we watched a rom-com about a chaotic group of friends raising kids together. Jenna and her roommate Liv brought snacks and wine. I brought emotional baggage I didn't unpack until halfway through the movie. A scene came on where one character's estranged sister sent her a wedding invitation with no +1 written in bold at the top. It was cruel in its clarity. I laughed. Not out of humor, but recognition. Been there, Jenna asked softly. Worse, I said. I didn't even get the invite. After the movie, Liv asked, do you think you'll ever reconnect? I thought for a long moment. I used to hope for that, but now I think I'm finally okay if they never come around. Jenna leaned over and hugged me, no words needed. As I walked home that night, the cool spring air filled my lungs with something that felt almost like peace. Not the kind that comes from resolution. The kind that comes from release. The next morning, I got an email from the school board. A student I had mentored was selected for a statewide award. They wanted me to speak at the ceremony. The same day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, it's Vanessa. Just thought you should know. Mom said you're probably too busy or whatever, but I told her we should have at least asked. I guess it's too late. Anyway, I hope you're good. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the award email to Jenna with a smiley face. She replied with 4 clapping hands and a heart. Later that week during lunch duty, I saw Lila in the hallway. I stopped her and told her how much her essay had meant to me. She beamed. You really think it was good? I don't just think it, I know it. She looked like she might cry. Then she whispered. Thank you. My mom never read it. I was scared she'd be mad. That's okay, I said. Sometimes the right people still find your story. As she walked away, I realized something important. I didn't need a seat at the family reunion. Because I'd been building something better. A life stitched together with kindness, a circle of people who saw me without distortion. A future where I didn't wait for permission to belong. Mine was not loud or grand. But it was real. And this time I wasn't the one being left out. I was the one choosing not to walk in. The floors were polished, the light soft but steady, and the logo on the glass door read Brooks Legal Group. My name wasn't next to Ethan's. It wasn't on the door. But it was on the advisory board plaque in the lobby, engraved just beneath 2 other names that meant something to me. One was Jenna's. The other was Miss Goldberg, who had mentored me when I didn't know I needed it. I walked slowly through the hallway past the glass-walled conference rooms where interns took notes with purpose and new associates practiced their opening statements like it was their first big shot. Some of them were. I passed a young woman at reception with bright pink hair and a nervous energy. She stood to greet us, straightening her blazer. Madison Wright, she asked. I've seen your name in the internal memos. I didn't know you'd be here today. I smiled. I come by sometimes, just checking in. Ethan squeezed my hand as we turned toward the back wing where his office overlooked the park and the river just beyond. We stood by the window for a moment looking out at the world we had built. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if they had supported you? He asked. I used to. Now I just wonder why it took me so long to stop needing it. He nodded. That's growth. I looked at him. Do you ever regret not helping them? When they asked. He took a deep breath. Number. Because they didn't ask for help. They asked for access. There's a difference. We sat in his office going over a few cases he wanted my insight on. Some involved educational advocacy. Others were civil claims from people in towns like the one I grew up in. Quiet places where it was easier to label people than to understand them. When the last meeting ended, we walked down the hall again. I saw the reflection of us in the glass and paused. We don't look like the people they expected us to become, I said. That's their loss, Ethan replied. We passed by the staff lounge where someone had written "Thank you, Madison" on a dry erase board in purple marker. I didn't know who wrote it, but it landed gently in my chest. Back at the lobby, Ethan held the door open for me. Do you ever think about going back? He asked quietly. To them, he nodded. Sometimes, but only in the way you think about old houses. The ones that creaked in the wrong places and smelled like mold in the summer. I remember the wallpaper. I remember the layout. But I don't want to move back in. Outside, the air smelled like lilacs. Someone across the street was walking a golden retriever in a red bandana. A city bus rumbled by and I felt a strange, steady joy settle in my chest. I'm home, I told him. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Later that evening, we sat on our balcony, 2 glasses of iced tea between us, the sound of summer slowly rising in the background. I thought about all the tables I had wanted to sit at, all the names I had wanted to be called, all the silences I had tried to fill. And I thought about this moment. The quiet, the peace. The place we had built not from apology but from choice. We drove home slowly, the kind of slow that doesn't come from traffic but from not needing to rush. Ethan had his hand on the gear shift occasionally, brushing my knee like a soft reminder that he was there. That we had made it here together. At a red light, he turned to me. What would you tell the 12-year-old version of you if she were sitting in the back seat right now? I looked out the window. A little girl in a blue jacket was walking beside her mom, her hand tucked tightly into the crook of the woman's elbow. I think I'd tell her she's not wrong for feeling out of place. That it's okay to ask for love and be disappointed when it doesn't come. But more than that, I'd tell her she will one day be loved loudly and clearly. Ethan nodded, eyes still on the road. And she'll be more than enough, he said. When we pulled into our driveway, the porch light clicked on automatically. I had once thought of it as a practical feature, but lately it felt symbolic. A small thing that always welcomed us home. Inside, the kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon from the candle I had lit that morning. On the fridge was a photo Jenna had taken on our wedding day, Ethan and I laughing at something off camera, wind tugging at my hair. There was no one else in the photo. No extended family, no big crowd. And still the picture felt full. Later that night, I opened an old memory box I had kept under our bed. Inside were scattered notes from college, a few childhood trinkets, and a card I had made for Vanessa's wedding all those years ago. It had never been opened. I had tucked it back into my suitcase after that day and never looked at it again. I opened it now. My 12-year-old handwriting was shaky, the lines crooked. I had drawn a heart next to her name and written, I hope today is your happiest day. I read it twice, then folded it shut. Ethan came in and saw it in my hands. Keeping it, I think so. Not because it still means what it did, but because it reminds me how far I've come. He kissed the top of my head. That's the thing about broken beginnings, he said. Sometimes they still lead to beautiful places. We turned in for the night, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I fell asleep without wondering if I should have said more. Done more. Waited longer. I had said enough. I had done enough. And I was no longer waiting. If you've ever been the one left out, the one who never quite fit, or the one others didn't choose, know this. You get to choose now. You get to choose your peace, your people, your place. And sometimes the most powerful story isn't the one where they beg you to return. It's the one where you don't need to. If this story echoed even a small part of your own, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear how you found your own version of home. And if you haven't yet, don't worry, it's not too late to begin. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about second chances, silent strength, and quiet victories that speak louder than revenge ever could. You belong. Right here. With us.